Howdy folks. Today I want to talk a little bit about factory functions. Factory functions are ways of kind of outsourcing the creation of your instances of your objects. And at first that might seem like needless complexity, but it actually can give you some really powerful stuff. Let's get into it. So for starters, let's say that we have class A and class A. This takes a constructor and has a print method. It's not none. Okay, pretty simple. And we're going to do something very similar with class B. Class B, same thing, same constructor, print, but it's actually going to print, save its number times 2. Very small change, but you can see that otherwise everything is the same. And a lot of times if we're working with a library that has much better management of this stuff, we might actually have a base class that actually just defines the print method for us and nothing else. Right, and so then we can actually extend our base class, which I actually need to import. Base wire base class. Okay, and then I don't need my print, I just need the constructor. In a lot of cases, you do actually want to have a base class when you're dealing with factory functions because a factory function returns a single instance. And if you're using strongly typed systems, you generally want that instance to conform to a specific type. All right, so then this is just class B, and so now what we have is we have two classes. All right, we have our base class, which has that print method, and class A sets the number, class B sets the number differently, but they both have the same print method. So now if I want to create a factory on this, a lot of times the factory actually exists in the same file as the base class, but that's okay. We're going to import class A, class A, and class B. And now we're going to do our factory. Class factory type. And we got to take in a type. If this was actually like TypeScript, this would be like either a string or like a specific class type. Basically, if type equals A, return new class A. And else if type, B, return new class B. And otherwise, like, you'd throw an exception. So in this case, class A and class B gonna be, you know what, let's they both take an input, don't they? Yes, they do. And all the inputs you want to actually pass into the class factory as well. Sometimes these can get quite complicated, and someone will actually have the class factory is itself a class that knows a bunch of stuff. In some other programming languages that can have a little bit more generics on their class names, things like that, you might not even have an actual specific return new class A. You might actually be looking up that class from a table based on this type. So that is also possible. Class factories are actually extremely popular in Java because Java is really, really powerful the way it handles its classes. Export class factory. So now let's say we have a server. In this server, we're not going to import class A, class B, or base class. What we're going to do is we're going to import the factory. And this equals factory. We're going to say type A with 5, okay. Factory B and 5. And stop print. Oops. Now, in this particular case, inst and inst2, all we know is that they're of type base class. If we were strongly typing this, that's the only thing we could guarantee is that they're of type base class and they conform to that spec, so we have the print method. This is why this can be really useful. Because instead of having to figure out here kind of what instance do I want here, do I want A or do I want B, I made this is just a string, right? I could get this from user input. I could get this from a file. And where that becomes a little more useful, if you scale it up, let's say you're creating a user out of a database. And you might have a bunch of subclasses of user like admins and server owners and regular users and guest users. And so instead of looking through and saying, okay, well, this is a user, and if it has this credentials, then it can do this action. What you can do is you could actually just pass it into a user factory and say, here's the type of user I'm dealing with. That factory figures out the appropriate object. And then you could just ask it something like send message or take action. And then that specific class knows how to figure out if, for example, maybe a guest can't take that action, but an admin can. You don't have to worry about that. All you have to worry about is I'm just going to call the user factory to get a specific user based on my data. And so that's where the power comes in, is it allows you to almost dynamically make your code do different things based on your data without actually writing those if statements. So if I go in here, let me run this. Oh, must call super constructor. That's actually true. That's a JavaScript thing. So anything that that has extends has to call the super constructor. And there we go. I passed 5 into both of them. One of them got doubled, the other didn't. Same thing, right? If I change this to B, they both get doubled because now it's calling a completely different instance, but I just had to change one little thing here. And so you can see how that could dynamically be really powerful. You could ask the user, even maybe for a simple calculator thing, what's the operation you want to do? Pass that into a factory, get back a class, and just tell it, here's the inputs, take the operation, and give me the result. And you don't have to care at that point what it is. You probably wouldn't do all that work for a calculator, but you could see how it could be kind of powerful. Now, the other thing that this can be really helpful with is if you're doing dependency injection, if you are trying to get a test class out of something, like maybe I actually have a test, and then that actually knows how to create a specific function or class that looks exactly like A, but is instrumented with test facilities that I can modify if I'm doing a unit test. You'd be surprised how important that is a lot of the time. Or maybe even I just say A, and the factory itself knows if I'm in test mode. And if I'm in test mode, it sets up the thing in a certain way, and I don't have to go through all the rest of my code and change things because the factory is already in there. So that's kind of the idea behind factory functions. Factory functions essentially take in, I use type here, but it could be any numerous parameters. It could be an object. It could be an array of data. It could be anything your heart desires. And then based on some criteria in that data, it'll figure out what type of object it should be returning. If this was TypeScript, it would actually look something like this because it always returns a type base, and we can't assume anything else about it. In fact, if you've done your base class well, you never have to. And then once you're doing your factory, you just pass in that parameter, and you don't really necessarily care what comes out the other end. You just kind of assume it's going to do what it should do. Hope this is helpful, folks. I'll see y'all next time.